Things you need to keep in mind before you begin to master your song. There are 7 steps that you need to follow if you want your mastered output to be in a very good quality. So it involves things that you need to do in the mixing stage as well as some preliminary steps in the mastering stage as well. I'm Florina Jain, otherwise known as Flow of Music, and I put out a lot of music production videos, especially in Logic Pro. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. So let's get into the video. This is my project and I have finished mixing. I've got vocals, percussion and a couple of other instruments as well. Now let's pay attention to the stereo out. In this place, you have 2 displays. Display 1 shows you where you've kept the fader. So if I've kept somewhere like this, it shows me that value. Always keep that to 0. And display number 2 shows you the peak or the maximum volume that comes out of the section that you play. So before you send your mixing output to mastering process, you need to make sure that the maximum peak attained is somewhere around -6 dB. So in our case, let's play the most loudest section in the song, which is the chorus. And let's see where it is coming. So it's coming up to around -5.3 dB, which is totally okay. Plus or minus -6 dB is somewhere we want to aim. And you might ask me why. So that is because you need to leave some headroom so that later on when you are mastering the song, you can add in plugins and finally add a limiter and fill up those gaps. If you don't leave gap at all, then you can't master using any plugin that you want. You need to leave that headroom. So make sure that once you finish your mixing, the final output volume comes around -6 dB. Another mistake that I commonly see with a lot of people who send me their mixes for mastering is that they put a limiter on the stereo out. Now, why would you want to do that? Limiter is something that you should prefer to use only during the mastering stage. See, the reason people prefer using a limiter is because they'll want to hear their song out loud through a phone. And obviously, that's not going to happen when you're around -6 dB peak level. So, that job has to be attained by mastering process only. Yes, you can, put a limiter and check how it sounds like for your own sake. But to send it to another mastering engineer or for yourself to master it, you should not add a limiter at the end of the mixing process. So I'll tell you what I mean. So people generally prefer to use a limiter here in the stereo out and they just boost the gain just because they want to hear it well. Sometimes even they want to do this process and then send it to the mastering engineer. Now that is a very big mistake. You shouldn't do that because now the mastering engineer is not having any room at all to do their magic. So never add a limiter at the end of the mixing process at all. Coming to another important point, you need to use the same settings that you used in the mixing project as well. Let's go ahead and see what I'm talking about. So when you go over to File, Project Settings, and then come to Audio, next to Sample Rate, what have you chosen? For my project, I chose 48 kilohertz. Now this is the same sample rate that I need to maintain if I open a new project and do my mastering process on that as well. I can't change the sample rate to a lesser value or more value and use it over there. Try to maintain the same things. Another thing you need to keep in mind is the bit depth. So just press Command and comma, go to recording. And here it is written 24-bit recording. So if you're using 24-bit recording, if it is checked, this has to be checked during the mastering process as well. You can't change these settings because these interfere with the quality of your track. So make sure that you utilize the same settings that you used in the mixing project also. So if you are wondering why I am mentioning that I use a separate Logic project for mixing and a separate Logic project for mastering, that is just my style. I even use a separate Logic project for recording as well. So a video on this will come up in the coming weeks, but this is just my style and you can understand more about that when that video comes. So I will now open the mastering project for the same track and I'll show you how the settings look like. So this is how my mastering project looks like, and if you go to file and come to project settings and then audio, you can see sample rate is kept to 48 kilohertz only. Same way if you go to the bit depth, 24 bit depth. Another point is having reference tracks. So if you want to learn more about reference tracks, my previous video is all about reference tracks. So you can go ahead and listen to that video as well. The reason why I want to mention it here as well is because if you have a reference track, you can look at the frequency spectrum of that track and look at your track and adjust it accordingly. So if the bass is too boomy in your track, but it's not in that way in the reference track, then you can obviously reduce it by looking at a linear EQ and then by slightly reducing it using a shelf curve or using a low cut. Now the important point is that when you are bouncing your mixing project, make sure you bounce it in WAV format and not in MP3 format. When you come to mastering project in a new Logic window, you're going to use the WAV format only because WAV format is of good quality. So you don't want the MP3 quality, right? So make sure you use a WAV format when you're exporting, bouncing and all those things. The last point that you need to know when it comes to preparations for mastering, you need to fade the starting and the ending a little bit. See, if you see here, let me zoom it in. So I have done a small fade in the starting as well as in the ending. So the reason is because when you bounce your mixing project, there is a tendency where the song might start right from the bounced portion. Okay, so the moment you hit play, the song is going to start. That's going to sound really abrupt. So if you don't want that abrupt feeling in your song, make sure you fade the starting and the ending alone. This is one of the lessons that I teach in my one-on-one music production lessons, and I've got students all around the world coming for classes. So if you are interested to join for one-on-one classes with me, then all you need to do is hit the website link in my description. There will be a form. You're going to just fill that up and submit it and I will reach out to you. If you have more doubts in this, feel free to put it in the comments and I'll help you out as much as I can. And if you want to learn more about mastering, then there will be a link attached to this video on the top corner. So you can watch that video if you want to learn how to master your songs. I hope this video was useful. Thank you so much for watching. Never stop learning, keep making music, and I'll see you guys in another video.